There is a sacred shift unfolding within people all over the world, a quiet awakening drawing them inward. They are no longer chasing the thrill of being everywhere with everyone doing everything. They are not losing interest in life, they are gaining interest in truth. As a person begins to rise spiritually, their perception changes. They start noticing things once ignored. They feel energies previously unnoticed, and their own home gradually transforms from a hiding place into a sanctuary. If you've ever wondered why the more awakened someone becomes, the more they cherish their own silence over the noise of others, pay attention. What follows will help you understand your evolution, safeguard your peace, and honor the sacred reasons behind your growing desire to stay home. There comes a season in the life of every spiritually awakened individual when noise ceases to feel like life and begins to feel like interference. What once seemed exhilarating, the crowded rooms, bustling streets, endless conversations, suddenly feels overwhelming, not because they are weak or disconnected, but because their spirit has evolved beyond the frequency that noise operates on. Awakening brings a subtle, almost invisible internal shift, profoundly felt within. The world continues spinning at its usual pace, but something inside slows, not from exhaustion, but from clarity. What once stimulated now overstimulates. What once entertained now exhausts. Noise, whether physical or emotional, becomes a weight the soul can no longer carry. It is not that they dislike people or gatherings. Their inner world has become so rich, delicate, and nurtured that external noise feels like someone walking through a sacred temple with muddy shoes. Once someone has touched inner peace, the chaos of the outside world feels abrasive. Once they have tasted silence that nourishes, sound that drains becomes intolerable. Society teaches that being out, seen, and active equals strength. But a spiritually awakened person learns that true power lies in existing peacefully without noise. Noise manifests in countless ways. There is the noise of others' opinions, loud, intrusive, and often uninvited. The noise of comparison, where everyone races to be something they are not. The noise of social circles, where conversations rarely touch depth. The noise of spaces drenched in stress, ego, and artificial happiness. Some of these spaces may not play music, yet they are among the noisiest on earth. As someone awakens, they feel this noise with more than their ears. It reverberates through their entire being. What blended into the background now stands out sharply: the unnecessary arguments, gossip, tension, distractions. They perceive the tone behind a word, the intention behind an action, the vibration beneath a gesture. Sensitivity rises, not from fragility, but from awareness. Awareness transforms noise into heaviness. Retreating is no longer about escaping life, but about preserving the life within. Staying home becomes a practice of safeguarding silence. Silence for an awakened soul is not emptiness. It is the presence of everything that matters. It is the subtle voice of intuition, the gentle whisper of wisdom that can only be heard when the world is muted. In this quiet, they rediscover themselves, realizing how much of life was spent reacting to noise, adjusting moods to fit others, defending peace in spaces that never offered it. The spirit eventually asserts, "No more." When a soul outgrows noise, it outgrows the need to be everywhere. It outgrows the urgency to keep pace. It outgrows the illusion that belonging to noise equates to belonging to life. Awakened individuals become selective in their surroundings because they recognize that every environment carries energy, and not all energies deserve access to their spirit. They may attend gatherings, meet people, and engage socially, but the craving is gone. They no longer cling or seek validation from external stimuli. The silence within has already nourished them. There is a profound distinction between being alone and being in solitude. Loneliness reflects emptiness, while solitude embodies fullness. Those who have outgrown noise dwell in the abundance of their own presence. They do not rely on stimulation to feel alive, validation to feel valued, or attention to feel seen. Wholeness exists within. The world often misinterprets this transformation as withdrawal, but the truth runs deeper. It is not avoidance. It is the elimination of interference, the removal of static from the emotional frequency, the minimization of distractions, pulling them away from their becoming. As spiritual awakening progresses, one begins to hear truths in silence that remain inaudible in noise. Intuition, guidance, and subtle nudges for the next life chapter become perceptible. Silence evolves into a teacher that no chaos can replace, while noise transforms into a test no longer required. The body responds differently too. Crowded, loud environments feel draining in ways never experienced before. Entering a noisy room may tighten the soul, provoke withdrawal, or induce subtle tension. It is not personal, it is spiritual. Noise feels foreign because peace has become essential. Stillness nourishes, and home becomes sanctuary. Within the sanctuary of home, the world slows just enough for the spirit to breathe. Choices abound, energy, conversations, pace, thoughts. There is no battle to defend peace. The space itself is peaceful. This shift is often preceded by heartbreak, disappointment, betrayal, exhaustion, or years of overextending oneself for the noise. The spirit finally claims, "I deserve stillness." Once this truth settles, it becomes irreversible. Awakened souls stay home not to hide, but to heal. They do not withdraw out of fear, but out of alignment. Their inner world fulfills them in ways external chaos never could. When noise is outgrown, the chase for validation, attention, or participation in chaotic spaces ceases. Their home becomes more than walls. It reflects their evolution. It is a place where the soul rests, the heart resets, and the mind recharges. It is a space where performance is unnecessary, where distractions are minimized and clarity can rise. Once a soul experiences this quiet, noise loses its appeal permanently. Solitude ceases to feel like absence and begins to embody the presence of truth. They prefer quiet corners to crowded rooms, gentle energy to chaotic gatherings, meaningful silence to superficial chatter. This preference is not about disliking others, but about heightened sensitivity. Sensitivity is not weakness, it is depth. It is the ability to feel the unseen, absorb the overlooked, and sense subtle vibrations others dismiss. Sensitive energy is a finely tuned instrument, detecting every nuance of tone, intention, tension, and hidden emotion. Awareness heightens responsibility to protect this energy as one would protect a cherished instrument. In social settings, sensitive souls feel everything: unspoken stories in eyes, stress behind smiles, heaviness floating in conversations. They sense pretenses, suppressed anger, emotional chaos. Judging is not the motive, the absorption is unavoidable. As awareness grows, the sensations once overlooked now become overwhelming. Normalcy becomes noise. What was once background becomes intrusive. Sensitive souls absorb energy like skin absorbs sunlight, effortlessly, instantaneously. Crowds exhaust not due to number, but due to emotional density, hidden tension, and chaotic vibration. Solitude thus serves as protection, a sanctuary, and a boundary preserving the spirit. It offers space to breathe without absorbing the world's weight, to process emotions without interference, to cultivate clarity, grounding, and inner peace. Misunderstandings often arise. The world may see withdrawal, but the truth is deeper. The retreat is intentional, sacred, and restorative, but they are not avoiding. they are preserving. They are selecting environments where their spirit does not have to struggle for space. They are choosing company that does not drain them. They are choosing conversations that do not ask them to shrink themselves or carry emotional weights that are not theirs. Sensitive energy is a blessing, but it can also become a burden if not protected. Awakened individuals often become the emotional anchors in social settings. They are the ones who listen deeply, who comfort effortlessly, who understand without explanation. They are the ones others lean on, confide in, and pour into. While this is beautiful, it can also be exhausting. Every heart they soothe takes a little from their own. Every story they carry lingers in their spirit. Every emotion they absorb remains long after the encounter ends. This is why sensitive souls retreat into solitude, not because they are weary of people, but because they are weary of holding what others never release. They need time alone to release what they've absorbed, cleanse their energy, recharge their spirit, and return to themselves. Solitude is not emptiness, it is restoration, medicine, and alignment. In solitude, they can hear their own thoughts again. In crowds, the noise overwhelms them. In solitude, their intuition speaks. In crowds, they are distracted by the swirling emotions around them. In solitude, they breathe without absorbing. In crowds, every conversation tugs at their energy. Sensitive souls seek a different connection, depth, sincerity, presence, truth. They want to speak from the heart, not out of habit. They want safety, not overstimulation. They want understanding, not depletion. When these connections are scarce in social spaces, they turn inward. They choose themselves. They choose stillness. They choose peace. This is not selfish isolation, it is self-preservation. When carrying sensitive energy, even a brief interaction can feel like a storm. A crowded room can feel like pressure on the chest. Loud environments feel abrasive on the spirit. Their energy responds before their mind does. Their intuition alerts before logic catches up. They sense imbalance before they can explain it. So they choose solitude, not out of fear of connection, but out of respect for alignment. Sensitive souls are soft in ways the world often cannot understand. They love deeply, listen fully, and care sincerely, but they also feel the cost of such care. They notice the tremble in a voice, the subtle shifts in energy, the hidden burdens others carry. They operate on a quiet radar that never turns off. Prolonged exposure to too many people does more than drain their social battery, it drains their spiritual battery. Their emotional, mental, intuitive, and energetic systems feel overloaded. Their body tightens. Their mind becomes foggy. Their spirit stretches thin. Their heart whispers, "I need space." And when a sensitive soul feels this, they listen. They retreat into solitude, not to escape, but as a ritual of recalibration. They return to themselves as naturally as others return to food, sleep, or water. Solitude becomes nourishment. Within it, they find clarity. They release emotions that aren't theirs. They return absorbed energy. They let go of stories they were never meant to carry. They reconnect with their own frequency, the one easily swallowed by noise. Spiritually awake, individuals understand that energy is living and breathing. It needs care, rest, and boundaries. The more sensitive the soul, the more sacred this responsibility. They choose solitude because their energy feels everything, their heart hears too much, and their intuition requires silence to guide them. They cannot thrive in spaces that deplete them. Most importantly, they choose solitude because they have learned that their well-being is their responsibility, not anyone else's. Alone, they are not lonely. They are home, grounded, whole. Their spirit rises, mind settles, and heart expands. They reconnect with the universe within, the part easily lost in the noise of crowds. Sensitive energy is powerful, wise, awake. Those who carry it learn that solitude is not retreat from life, but a return to the truest, deepest parts of themselves. Peace does not come easily. It is not inherited, handed down, or casually found. It is earned intentionally through seasons of chaos, years of self-betrayal, and battles fought in silence. When someone finally reaches this sacred inner space, breathing a level of calm previously unknown, they guard it fiercely. This is why spiritually awakened people stay home, not to run from the world, but to protect the peace they fought relentlessly to create. Peace is not soft, passive, or effortless. Achieving it requires confronting every place within oneself where peace did not exist, unlearning harmful patterns, letting go of draining people, healing wounds, facing terrifying truths, and rising from experiences meant to break them. Those who survive this inner battle no longer see peace as luxury. It is survival. Home becomes the place where peace can exist unshaken, unaffected by external noise. Home becomes sanctuary after years of being pulled in directions misaligned with the soul. It becomes the space to hear oneself, feel oneself, and be oneself without interruption. They stay home because stepping into the world can feel like entering a storm, not because the world is malicious, but because it is loud. People are loud, expectations are loud, drama is loud, pressure is loud, and those who fought for peace know that a single moment of wrong energy can pull them back into battles they no longer wish to fight. Peace is not a gift, it requires maintenance. One must tend to it, protect it, and choose it repeatedly. Awakened people understand this deeply. They know that one wrong conversation can disturb their spirit, one toxic person can drain energy, one careless remark can reopen old wounds, and one stressful environment can undo weeks of healing. So they become selective, not out of arrogance but wisdom. Peace is too rare, too sacred, and too valuable to risk indiscriminately. At home, they control the atmosphere. They choose the energy they allow in. They select the voices they listen to. They dictate the type of conversations they welcome. They choose the pace of the day, the tone of the night, the rhythm of their inner world. There is a strength in staying home. It takes strength to say, "This world is loud and I choose to step away." It takes strength to detach from people who once defined identity. It takes strength to leave behind environments that shape their worth. It takes strength to know that chaos no longer belongs to them. People often misunderstand this. They assume staying home equals isolation, withdrawal, or avoidance. But sometimes staying home is the most courageous choice. It is choosing oneself, honoring earned peace, refusing to abandon oneself for the comfort of others. Those who have endured turmoil, emotional, relational, spiritual, become protective in ways the world cannot comprehend. They guard peace like a scar that once caused immense pain, a fragile new beginning, or something they nearly lost. Home becomes the space where healing expands, clarity arrives, and broken pieces are restored. It is symbolic, a reminder of survival, of choosing healing over chaos, of walking away from what harmed them and finding themselves again. They stay home not out of fear, but because they trust themselves. They know their boundaries, triggers, and what disturbs or nourishes their soul. Home nourishes them. In its quiet, they reconnect with truth. They breathe freely without guarding their heart. They rest without vigilance. They exist without performance. Silence becomes authenticity. Once peace seemed boring, silence empty, and stillness lonely. Now they know better. Silence is not the absence of life. It is the absence of noise. Stillness is not stagnation, it is restoration. Solitude is not loneliness, it is freedom. Peace teaches them that they do not need crowds to feel complete. They do not need noise to feel alive. They do not need chaos to feel important. They no longer crave stimulation, they crave alignment. The more spiritually awake someone becomes, the more sensitive their spirit grows to anything that threatens their equilibrium. They feel imbalance instantly. They sense manipulation before it is spoken. They recognize emotional turbulence without explanation. They detect dishonesty with intuition long before the mind can name it. And because they feel deeply, they guard fiercely. Peace becomes their priority. Home becomes their shelter. Solitude becomes their safeguard. Even relationships transform. They no longer tolerate individuals who bring conflict. They no longer entertain people who thrive on chaos. They no longer give access to those who once drained them. They no longer say yes to environments that contradict the harmony they've worked tirelessly to cultivate. Their peace cost them friendships, versions of themselves, comfort zones, old identities, and everything that had been forced, by fear or by pretension. So now they refuse to jeopardize it. Those who have fought for peace no longer fear missing out. They have already experienced the chaos they choose to leave behind. They know what it feels like to lose themselves in noise. They know the exhaustion of carrying burdens that are not theirs. They know the pain of boundaries they never set and the cost of remaining where they didn't belong. So now they choose differently. They choose themselves. They choose quiet mornings, soft nights, safe spaces, and slow healing. They choose warmth over intensity, honesty over performance, alignment over approval. Home becomes a temple, a declaration, proof that their peace is worth protecting. Once someone truly understands the value of peace, they never let anything or anyone take it from them again. At a certain stage in awakening, a person realizes something that previously eluded them. Growth is not loud. Growth is not chaotic. Growth does not come from rushing or keeping pace with the noise of the world. Growth occurs in quiet, in slow, gentle moments, when the soul finally has room to breathe. That is why spiritually awakened people stay home, not to hide from life, but because they understand that stillness is where transformation begins. You cannot hear the whispers of your intuition when everything around demands your attention. You cannot heal old wounds while surrounded by the same distractions that caused them. You cannot evolve while living at the pace of those uninterested in rising with you. Stillness becomes sacred because it creates space. Space for reflection, for clarity, for becoming. The world teaches constant motion, to stay busy, chase, prove, hustle, fill every moment. But awakened souls know the truth. Constant motion is rarely growth. It is often avoidance. One can be busy a lifetime and never meet oneself, never heal, never face inner truths. They may run towards success, but simultaneously run from their own soul. So they choose to stay home, not from fear, but with intention. They sit with themselves, observe their thoughts, let emotions surface instead of suppressing them. They feel what life once made them ignore. Stillness becomes the ground where growth takes root. In stillness, they notice patterns previously repeated unconsciously. In stillness, they confront avoided truths. In stillness, they face shadows and meet abandoned parts of themselves. Growth is seldom comfortable. It is often silent, and that silence can feel heavy. But those awakening understand that profound transformation occurs in that silence. Home becomes the place where this silent evolution unfolds without shame, pressure, or performance. There is no audience, applause, or validation, only truth, and truth requires space. At home, they can break down without being observed, rebuild without haste, redefine without questioning, release gradually, forgive slowly, heal gently. They no longer need to rush evolution for anyone else. They no longer need to pretend they are okay when their soul requires rest, release, and renewal. In stillness, They rediscover themselves, their real needs, desires, and voice. They distinguish what they truly want from what they were conditioned to want. They begin separating external noise from inner guidance, seeing life through clarity rather than survival. Many fear stillness because it forces confrontation with what they've avoided. Awakened souls no longer run. Growth demands honesty, and honesty demands quiet. They stay home because it is the only place where stillness is accessible. The outside world is filled with rush, demands, expectations, and comparison. Home is where they slow, breathe deeply, and hear the thoughts buried beneath years of distraction. Stillness does not merely heal, it teaches patience, self-awareness, mind control, acceptance of what is and release of what was. Transformation cannot occur while being pulled in all directions, nor while drowning in noise. One cannot rise while attempting to be everywhere at once. Growth requires pause, a moment when outer stillness allows inner evolution. Awakened people feel this instinctively. They know stepping back does not mean falling behind, resting does not mean losing, and sitting still does not mean doing nothing. Staying home becomes self-respect, a declaration that growth deserves time, space, and silence. It is a promise to no longer ignore the inner world for the outer. Society values productivity, but awakened souls value evolution. Evolution does not occur in noise, it occurs in stillness. At home, they journal, reflect, breathe, slow the mind to hear what their soul has been signaling for years. They connect with an inner world richer, deeper, and more meaningful than anything external. Stillness rewires, strengthens, and awakens. It is protected, chosen, honored, and nurtured. Home is not luxury, it is part of becoming. They choose home because they have outgrown superficial connections. There comes a time when old ways of relating, entertaining, pleasing, or socializing no longer nourish. What once felt exciting now feels distracting. What once felt like belonging now feels empty. They recognize that many conversations are noise, many gatherings performances, many relationships attempts to fill silence rather than honor it. Home becomes a sanctuary, the only place where they don't have to shrink, pretend, or tolerate draining energy. This shift arrives quietly, in small moments, sitting with someone and feeling lonelier than when alone, laughing at a joke with no joy in the chest, entering a room full of people and knowing, I no longer belong here, not because I am better, but because I am different. That difference pulls them inward. Superficial connections once filled life because they did not know themselves, sought affirmation, attention, validation, or temporary warmth. They tolerated one-sided friendships, shallow conversations, people who only came when convenient. They tolerated emptiness because they didn't know how to request fullness. Now asking for fullness is the only thing that feels right. Emotional, spiritual, and mental growth has made the inner world richer than external noise. They no longer chase external validation. Peace becomes the priority, and that priority changes everything. Standards rise, not from arrogance, but from having experienced true connection, honest conversation, calming presence, energy that feels like sunlight instead of pressure. Once they understand what real feels like, returning to fake is impossible. They choose home, quiet evenings over chaotic gatherings, meaningful moments over crowds, fewer people, but deeper bonds. Some misunderstand this, but those who live it know the truth. It is not loneliness, it is alignment. Home is more than four walls. It is a space to breathe without observation, think without interruption, heal without judgment, feel without explanation. It is where the soul untangles from expectations, where one reconnects with who they were before the noise, where spirit rests, resets, and rebuilds. Growing out of superficial connections brings deeper self-awareness. They feel the weight of every interaction. They sense when someone drains them, when interest is convenient, when reciprocity is missing. Instead of dismissing these feelings, they honor them. They trust intuition, that small voice that whispers, "This doesn't feed your spirit." They trust the discomfort rising when forcing themselves into spaces already outgrown. Solitude becomes a teacher. Home becomes a classroom. They learn to sit with their thoughts, truth, and dreams. From this space, the desire for shallow connections disappears. They seek honesty, presence, intentionality, friendships where silence is comfortable, vulnerability is safe, and listening equals speaking. They outgrow those intimidated by emotional depth. They outgrow surface-level relationships. They outgrow the version of themselves needing others to feel whole. They now build life from the inside out, not the outside in. They choose home because it mirrors their evolution. It reflects and protects the softness they've nurtured. It holds the healing they've worked so hard to create. It gives them the peace the world cannot provide, and peace once earned becomes non-negotiable. Choosing home over superficial connections is not weakness. It is not isolation. It is not fear. It is a sign of maturity, of clarity, of understanding their worth, of refusing to pour themselves into spaces that cannot hold them. The world may call it isolation, but the soul recognizes it as transformation. Disconnecting from the shallow makes space for what is real, and what is real arrives quietly, without performance, pressure, or pretending. This is the connection they now crave, the kind that feels authentic, not like a mask, the kind that nurtures instead of drains, the kind that stays instead of fades. Until such connections appear, home is enough. Their own presence is enough. Their peace is enough. They choose home because they've learned the right people will never ask them to shrink, dim themselves, tolerate, or pretend. The right people will not fear their depth. The right people will not mistake solitude for rejection. The right people will honor the quiet radiance of a soul at peace. Until those people arrive, they sit in the comfort of their own company, because superficial connections are no longer a place to call home. They stay home because their spirit is learning boundaries. Every person reaches a moment when they understand something crucial. Peace is not just wished for, it is protected. And the only way to protect it is by creating boundaries in how much you give, who enters your space, what energy you allow around you, and how you let others treat you. This is not selfishness or avoidance, it is evolution. Evolution often requires stepping back from the world to hear the subtle voice of the soul. For too long, they had no boundaries, letting others enter, take, unload, and leave without accountability. They were always listening, always helping, always making space, even when running on empty. They thought kindness meant unlimited access, love meant constant availability, loyalty meant self-sacrifice. Somewhere along the way, they lost sight of their emotional capacity. Home becomes the space to rebuild. It becomes the training ground to say no without guilt, rest without apology, listen to the body when tired, and honor the quiet voice inside that says, "You don't have to carry everything for everyone." They retreat not because the world overwhelms, but because they are finally learning what too much actually feels like. Boundaries start small, a simple choice, ignoring a call when energy is low, declining an invitation once accepted out of obligation, stepping away from people who take more than they give, removing themselves from draining conversations. With each choice, their spirit feels lighter, safer, stronger. Home becomes a sanctuary where they can hear themselves. Outside, the noise of others' expectations can drown out their own needs. At home, they ask the questions they have avoided for years. What do I need? What do I want? What drains me? What nourishes me? Answers emerge only in silence, stillness, and solitude. Learning new boundaries often feels lonely. They realize how many relationships were built on over-availability, over-forgiveness, or over-accommodation. They notice discomfort when they stop giving unlimited access. They see who disappears when they stop performing roles that benefited others. Though painful, these revelations set them free. Those who leave when boundaries are set were never truly invested. They were invested in what they could extract. Home becomes the safe space to observe these shifts without overwhelm, to feel emotions instead of fleeing them, to stand beside boundaries without external challenge. As the spirit strengthens, they understand boundaries are not walls, they are doors, opened selectively. Saying no to the wrong things creates space for the right things. Protecting energy is not shutting people out. It is allowing the right people in, those who respect space, match effort, value presence, and honor peace. Learning boundaries is learning self-respect spiritually. Not everyone deserves access to time, softness, or a seat at the table. Energy is precious. Healing is sacred. Peace is invaluable. Anything threatening it, people, habits, thoughts, or patterns, must be released. Home is where they practice this release safely. At home, they breathe deeply, think clearly, and heal slowly. They untangle from old versions of themselves, those who didn't know how to stand up, stop overgiving, or protect their spirit from exhaustion. They are becoming the person they needed. Someone who honors limits, knows worth, and does not apologize for choosing themselves. Boundaries are built in stillness, which exists most clearly at home. They stay there, not to hide, not to escape, but to grow, strengthen their inner voice, reconnect with intuition, rebuild self-trust, and discern alignment. When they eventually step back into the world, it is with intention. They no longer say yes without thought. They no longer stay in spaces where the soul feels tense. They no longer shrink for others' comfort. They walk with boundaries intact, not as shields, but as guides. Those meant for them, experiences aligned with them, and energy that matches them will meet them where they are without violating the lines set to protect their spirit. They stay home because learning boundaries requires calm, quiet, and courage. It requires stepping away long enough to hear truth clearly. It requires permission to evolve, even if misunderstood. Until boundaries feel rooted and unshakable, home is exactly where they belong. They stay home because they have finally become enough for themselves. A quiet power rises when a person stops seeking themselves in others, stops needing validation, attention, or approval to feel complete. When they look in the mirror, they recognize that what they sought externally has been inside them all along. This shift grows slowly through pain, healing, silence, understanding. When it arrives, it changes how they navigate the world. For years, they tried to fill emptiness with noise, people, and fleeting moments. They entered rooms hoping to be seen, stayed in conversations hoping to be heard, leaned on relationships hoping to be chosen. They chased connection not because they lacked love for themselves, but because they hadn't yet realized the depth of self-love they were capable of. They kept searching for belonging, understanding, comfort, direction. The inward journey transforms you. It teaches that needing people is different from depending on them for identity. It teaches that attention is not affection, presence is not loyalty, and company is not connection. You can be surrounded by people and feel empty, yet be alone and feel complete. Once enough for themselves, they stop chasing misaligned spaces. They stop trying to earn love that should have always been freely given. They stop shrinking to fit into rooms that were never built for their spirit. Home becomes the place where they can honor this new version of themselves, the version that no longer begs for a seat at anyone's table because they've learned how to build their own. At home, they find comfort in their own presence. They learn to enjoy the quiet. They realize that their thoughts are not their enemy, their feelings are not too much, their desires are not unreasonable, and their dreams are not impossible. They sit with themselves and acknowledge, I am not missing anything, I am not lacking anything, I am not broken. They recognize that the world taught them to search externally for a completeness that was always meant to be internal. It's not that they dislike people now, it's that they no longer need them to feel valuable. They no longer chase friendships that drain them. They no longer cling to relationships that confuse them. They no longer engage with energy that diminishes their spirit. Instead, they choose themselves. They choose the soft blanket, the warm tea, the book that nourishes their mind, the silence that centers their heart. They no longer run from their solitude. They melt into it as if returning home. Being enough for themselves also means they no longer tolerate what they once did. When they didn't know their worth, they accepted crumbs and called it love, inconsistency and called it patience, half-heartedness and called it compromise. Once they learned how deeply they could love themselves, they outgrew every situation and person that treated their heart as optional. They stopped giving their time to those who didn't value it, their loyalty to those who didn't respect it, and their energy to situations that offered nothing in return. Home becomes a sacred space, not for hiding, but for becoming. A place to be soft, still, to breathe, without performing for acceptance, without earning love. It exists simply because they are the source of their own love. When someone becomes enough for themselves, something extraordinary occurs. They stop participating in anything that harms them. They stop trying to prove their worth, to be chosen, or to convince others of their value. They stop chasing fleeting affection. Instead, they pour into themselves. They learn to be their own rest, inspiration, comfort, and encouragement. They wake each morning feeling at home in their own soul, and they sleep peacefully at night because they no longer fear being alone. They fear returning to the version of themselves that didn't know their worth. They stay home because they love the way it feels to be with themselves. They cherish quiet mornings with no pressure, moments when the mind wanders freely, and the simplicity of choosing what they want without permission. They love building a life that feels like theirs, rather than one shaped by others. They are not withdrawing from the world. They are simply no longer willing to lose themselves in it. People may misunderstand this transformation. They may say, "You've changed," not realizing the person has finally become who they were always meant to be. They may say, "You're distant," not realizing the person is simply closer to themselves. They may say, "You don't have time anymore," not understanding that the awakened soul now values time and spends it intentionally. They do not need external validation or approval. They no longer live for others' acceptance because they have already accepted themselves. That acceptance is powerful. When someone becomes enough for themselves, they become unshakable. They no longer fear being alone, refuse to abandon themselves for temporary comfort, and no longer rely on the world to define their identity. They walk into life already knowing who they are. They stay home not because they've given up on life, but because they are finally living it on their own terms. They choose what aligns with their soul. They protect their peace, nurture their spirit, and heal parts of themselves once ignored. They build emotional strength from the inside out, listen to intuition, and love themselves in ways that once felt impossible. Home is no longer a limitation. It is liberation. It is the space where they honor the truth that they are whole, worthy, deserving, and complete within themselves. They stay home because they have discovered the beauty of their own presence and refuse to lose it again. If you find yourself drawn more to home, to silence, to your inner world, understand that you are not retreating, you are rising. Your spirit chooses truth over noise, peace over chaos, depth over distraction. This is not isolation. This is elevation. This is not loneliness. This is awakening. One day, the world will come to understand the power of someone who first learned to go within before reaching out.